The unexpected war, the vast expanse of space, had always been silent, its cold, endless blackness broken only by distant stars and the occasional comet. But that silence would soon be shattered by something that no one on Earth could have ever predicted. It wasn't a distant storm or cosmic anomaly, it was an invasion. And this wasn't just any invasion. It was a war the humans had no idea was coming, and they were unprepared for the ferocity that would follow. The Arcturians, a race of powerful, technologically advanced aliens, had been watching Earth for years. To them, humanity was nothing. More than a curious experiment, a species growing rapidly, but still fragile, divided, and easily conquerable. They had scanned Earth's communication networks, analyzed every bit of data, and concluded that Earth's civilizations were ripe for domination. The Arcturians had conquered countless planets before, and Earth seemed like just another prize in their endless expansion. They had no idea how wrong they were about the humans. Commander Zarnak of the Arcturian fleet had made his calculations. He looked at Earth as a strategic location to expand their empire, an easily accessible planet whose people would likely fold under the pressure. Zarnak, a ruthless leader with no tolerance for weakness, was convinced that his fleet of warships would wipe out Earth's defenses within hours. He had no idea what kind of fight he was about to face. On the morning of the invasion, the first sign of the alien fleet came from the sky, a sudden blinding flash as multiple ships broke through Earth's atmosphere. These weren't the small, stealthy craft that humans had feared in their science fiction stories. These ships were massive, their silhouettes casting enormous shadows across the cities below. They looked like metallic leviathans, their hulls shining in the sunlight as they descended toward Earth, their weapons primed and ready to obliterate anything in their path. At first, no one understood what was happening. People on the ground watched as the ships hovered above the cities, their engines roaring like thunder. Panic spread quickly. Emergency alerts went off in every city. Military forces scrambled to respond, launching everything from fighter jets to missiles, but it wasn't enough. The alien ships seemed impervious to every weapon the humans had. The sky lit up with explosions, but the Arcturians barely flinched. It was clear to the aliens that their first step, overwhelming shock and awe, had worked, but what the Arcturians hadn't expected was the one thing that humans possessed in abundance: sheer willpower. Jacob Pierce, a seasoned fighter pilot, stood in his cockpit, staring up at the incoming threat. His hands tightened around the controls as he watched the massive alien ships descend over New York. The buildings below were already on fire, and the sky was filled with black smoke. The sight was surreal, like something out of a nightmare. "Commander, we need you to engage the enemy now." His squadron leader's voice came through his headset, pulling him back to the reality of the battle. "No time for hesitation. The world is counting on us." Jacob swallowed his fear, his heart pounding in his chest. This wasn't just another training mission. This was real. The very existence of humanity was at risk. His mission wasn't about victory, it was about survival. He launched his jet into the sky, the roar of the engines shaking his bones, as he joined the rest of the fleet. As he flew toward the alien ships, Jacob knew the odds were slim. Their technology was centuries ahead of humanity's, and their ships were unlike anything Earth had ever encountered. But there was one thing the Arcturians hadn't accounted for: humans didn't fight like machines. They fought with heart, with grit, with the instinct to protect what was theirs. When Jacob and his squadron approached the alien vessels, they released everything they had: laser-guided missiles, advanced ammunition, anything that could penetrate the alien ship's shields. But it was like throwing pebbles at a mountain. The alien vessels didn't even flinch. "We need something bigger," Jacob muttered under his breath as he watched his missiles explode harmlessly against the ship's force fields. This wasn't working. They needed to think smarter, not harder. Back on the ground, the world was in chaos. Governments were in disarray. Military communication lines were scrambled. and people screamed in the streets, wondering if this would be the end. But in the midst of all this fear, there was something that began to stir, something unexplainable, something that Zarnak, the alien commander, could never have predicted: resistance. Jacob's squadron wasn't going down easily. Despite the overwhelming power of the Arcturians, they continued to attack, refusing to surrender. They began to use unconventional tactics, attacking from angles the aliens hadn't anticipated, using the terrain of Earth itself to their advantage. The larger Arcturian ships found it harder to move through Earth's atmosphere. They couldn't use their massive firepower in close quarters. And then, something strange happened. A small group of humans, fighting with everything they had, managed to breach one of the alien ships. It wasn't much, but it was enough to send a message. The humans weren't going to fold so easily. Commander Zarnak, watching from his ship, could feel something shift in the atmosphere. What was happening? He had expected a quick victory. He had expected the humans to cower, but they were fighting back. And as he watched more and more human fighters engage, he realized that his arrogance might be his undoing. In the midst of the destruction and chaos, something incredible began to happen. The humans were uniting. The world's leaders set aside their differences, and every country started working together, not as separate nations, but as one united force. They were no longer just defending their cities. They were defending their way of life. Jacob, flying through the chaos, looked around at the growing resistance. This wasn't just about fighting back, it was about something bigger. Humanity was starting to show the Arcturians exactly what they were up against. "You want to fight us?" Jacob thought to himself as he locked his target and fired another missile. Bad move. The alien arrival, the stillness of the morning sky shattered with a deafening roar, an unnatural hum that sent chills through the spine of anyone who was unfortunate enough to hear it. For years, Earth had lived in the peace that came with being a speck in the vastness of space. Yet, in an instant, that peace was torn apart by a force unlike anything humanity had ever known. The Arcturian fleet descended from the heavens in a formation that seemed impossible, their massive ships blotting out the sun. Each vessel was a war machine of unfathomable power, their sleek metallic surfaces reflecting the light of Earth's sun in blinding flashes. To anyone watching from the ground, they looked like ominous shadows from another world, alien in every way. It began with a single ship, a massive monolith of metal and light. Its engines roared as it broke through Earth's atmosphere with terrifying precision, leaving a trail of fire in its wake. The people below had no time to react. By the time the first ship hit the ground, the shockwave sent buildings crumbling and windows shattering. And then came the second, the third, and the fourth. More ships followed, each larger and more imposing than the last. The sky seemed to darken, not with clouds, but with the weight of their arrival. Jacob Pierce, a fighter pilot just beginning his morning routine, was one of the first to see the true scale of the invasion. He had been tracking a strange anomaly on his radar, something that didn't belong. At first, he thought it was just a glitch in the system, but then it started to grow. The radar blipped frantically, showing dozens of incoming objects descending toward Earth at breakneck speeds. His eyes widened in disbelief as he read the figures. 50, no, 100 unidentified ships. And they were all heading straight for Earth. "Control, what the hell is going on?" Jacob's voice was calm, but the tension in his chest was unmistakable. The response crackled in his ear, panic creeping into the tone. "It's not a glitch, Pierce. These are real. Get to your plane now. This is a code red." His mind raced as he scrambled into his jet, the ground crew working quickly to get him airborne. The engines roared to life beneath him, but nothing could have prepared him for the view that awaited him as he took off. The horizon was swallowed by the shadows of alien ships. Some hovered above the ocean, others positioned themselves in the sky above major cities, casting long dark shadows that seemed to stretch for miles. Humanity's first instinct was shock, no. One knew what to do. People looked up, expecting the usual world-ending scenarios, the asteroid, the cosmic disaster. But this was different. These were no random threats. This was deliberate. Earth was under attack, and the invaders weren't here to ask for peace. In the chaos of the first hours, all attempts to communicate with the aliens failed. Messages were sent, both military and diplomatic, but there was no response. Earth's defense systems, the pride of its military might, were rendered useless against the alien vessels. Missiles fired from Earth's strongest defense satellites disintegrated before even coming close. The ship's shields were far stronger than anything humanity had ever seen, absorbing everything like they were made of the very fabric of space itself. Meanwhile, Commander Zarnak, leading the invasion from his flagship, watched Earth's first attempts at resistance with detached amusement. On the bridge, surrounded by his officers, he regarded the humans below with a cold, calculating gaze. "They still think they have a chance," he said to no one in particular. His voice low but steady. The officers around him remained silent, knowing that Zarnak's strategy was simple: destroy any trace of humanity's defenses and claim the planet. For the Arcturian Empire. "Prepare the final phase of the invasion," he commanded. "We will show them what true power is." Beneath him, Earth was already buckling under the first wave. Cities crumbled under the relentless attack. The ground shook as one ship, larger than a skyscraper, landed with such force that it cracked the earth. As it opened, alien soldiers emerged, their armor gleaming with an unnatural light, weapons drawn. They walked like conquerors, like beings who had seen countless civilizations fall. They didn't need to speak. Every human on the ground understood that resistance was futile. But as the alien forces began to spread through the streets, something remarkable started happening. The chaos, the fear, it sparked something in the human spirit. Across the globe, there were whispers of resistance. It began in small groups of civilians picking up whatever weapons they could find. They fought back in the only way they knew how, with the kind of raw courage that had built their species from the ground up. Jacob, now airborne with his squadron, locked onto the nearest alien ship. He knew it was a long shot, but he wasn't going to let Earth fall without a fight. His missiles streaked toward one of the alien ships, but they were destroyed mid-air by the ship's energy shields. It was like trying to shoot a bullet into a brick wall. "We need a new plan," Jacob muttered to himself, frustration building. But then something unexpected happened. As he flew closer, something in the alien ship's systems began to glitch. A slight flicker. The alien vessel's shield seemed to momentarily flicker and waver. It was enough to give Jacob a small opening. He fired again, this time targeting the small weak point he'd noticed. His missiles hit true. The alien ship erupted in a flash of bright, otherworldly light before crashing into the ocean below. It was a small victory, but it was enough to ignite a spark in the hearts of every fighter on Earth. Back in space, Zarnak stared at the damage with a furrowed brow. "How could this be?" he muttered. "Humans are fighting back." The first sign of resistance had been given, and it was enough to shake the invaders' confidence. Jacob's small victory, however, had done more than destroy a ship. It had reminded the Arcturians of one crucial fact: humans might not be as weak as they thought. The unexpected resistance, the deafening roar of alien warships had barely settled when the humans began to do the unthinkable. They fought back. It started small, with individuals taking up arms in their own neighborhoods, but the resolve that burned within them quickly spread like wildfire. Despite the devastation, the Earth's spirit had not been broken. It had only just begun to rise. Jacob Pierce stood in the cockpit of his fighter jet, watching the plumes of smoke rise from the remains of the fallen alien ship. His hands were steady, but inside, a fire was igniting, a fire that burned brighter with each passing second. He wasn't the only one. Across Earth, the resistance was no longer just surviving. It was starting to thrive. In the rubble of New York City, amidst the ruins of shattered skyscrapers and broken streets, survivors were organizing. What had once been a city in chaos was now a bustling hub of rebellion. Makeshift barricades were set up, and civilians who had never held a weapon in their lives suddenly found themselves armed and ready to fight for the future of their planet. In Europe, a small group of engineers and scientists who had barely escaped the initial bombing began to work in secret. They didn't have access to the advanced alien technology, but they had something the invaders couldn't understand: human creativity. They used scraps from destroyed ships, old military equipment, and their knowledge of Earth's terrain to begin constructing guerrilla weapons and traps. But the real turning point came when the first human-led counterattack hit. It wasn't a large force, but the surprise strike sent shockwaves through the Arcturian command. For the first time, an alien warship had been destroyed by human ingenuity. No one had expected humans to be able to land a successful hit, let alone inflict real damage. But they had. Jacob's eyes scanned the battlefield below. His squadron had joined the resistance fighters in a desperate attempt to keep the Arcturians from completely overrunning Earth's defenses. The humans didn't have the numbers, nor the advanced technology, but they had one thing that the aliens didn't understand: a refusal to back down. "This isn't over," Jacob muttered to himself, his hands gripping the controls as he dove into another attack run. The aliens were advanced, but the humans had been underestimated, and that would cost the Arcturians everything. On the ground, in the heart of the cities, the resistance began to evolve. It wasn't just military leaders commanding troops anymore. Every person, from factory workers to students, had taken on a role. They didn't wait for orders, they acted. Underground networks grew, and Earth's fight had now become a unified front. It didn't matter if they were civilians or soldiers. Everyone was a fighter. Everyone was part of the resistance. In the underground bunkers, human scientists and engineers started developing countermeasures. They found ways to disrupt the alien ship's energy fields using simple electromagnetic pulses. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it was enough to disable a few ships long enough for humans to strike. And strike they did, quick, coordinated. Attacks on the alien supply lines, disrupting their communications and causing confusion in their ranks. Commander Zarnak had been confident when the invasion began. The Arcturian fleet was unstoppable. Their weapons, their technology, their power, nothing on Earth could challenge them. But with each passing day, his confidence began to waver. The humans were learning. They were adapting faster than he thought possible. They weren't just defending their cities anymore, they were striking back. Every small victory added fuel to the fire of resistance. Earth was fighting back in ways Zarnak couldn't predict. How are they doing this? Zarnak demanded, slamming his fist on the console in frustration. We are their superiors in every way. They should have crumbled by now. His officer looked at him nervously. It seems they've begun using guerrilla tactics, Commander. They're exploiting weaknesses we didn't know we had. Impossible, Zarnak spat. We control the skies, the land, the seas. These humans. They're nothing. But deep down, even Zarnak could feel the shift. The humans weren't just surviving, they were thriving. They were outsmarting the invaders at every turn. And for the first time, Zarnak understood that this would not be the quick conquest he had envisioned. This was going to be a fight that could last far longer than he had anticipated. As the Arcturian forces tried to regroup and reorganize, the humans made their move. A group of resistance fighters, using information gathered from hacked Arcturian transmissions, launched a surprise attack on one of the alien motherships. It wasn't just about destruction, it was about making a statement. The humans weren't just victims. They were warriors. Jacob's squadron flew in low, targeting the weak spots of the alien fleet with laser precision. The alien ships, powerful as they were, still had vulnerabilities, and the humans were learning to exploit them. As one of the motherships exploded in a massive fireball, the Earth's resistance erupted in cheers. It was a small victory, but it was enough to prove something that the Arcturians had never anticipated. Earth would not go quietly into the night. "Keep pushing!" Jacob shouted into his comms as his squadron descended. "We've got them on the ropes. Let's make sure they don't get back up." Back on the ground, the people of Earth weren't waiting for an order. The resistance was no longer just a movement, it was a global force. And as each victory was won, each alien ship destroyed, the world began to see something incredible happening. Earth, against all odds, was starting to fight back. Zarnak watched from his flagship, the weight of disbelief settling over him. What had once seemed like an easy victory was now a war he wasn't sure his forces could win. The humans, in their desperation, had become something more than just survivors. They had become a force of nature, an unstoppable wave that, for the first time in his life, Zarnak feared. The Arcturians had underestimated humanity, and that mistake would prove to be their greatest downfall. The humans had started the fight by defending their planet. But now they were fighting for something far greater, their survival, their freedom, and their future. And that was something the Arcturians had no idea how to stop. The unleashing of humanity's secret as the war against the Arcturians raged on. The humans had proven something remarkable. They were capable of adapting, learning, and most importantly, surviving. The alien invaders had underestimated their resourcefulness, but now they were beginning to realize that humans possessed something far more powerful than advanced technology or superior weaponry, the will to fight for what they loved. Yet, despite their tenacity, the humans still found themselves struggling to match the sheer force of the Arcturian fleet. Their missiles were ineffective, their weapons insufficient against the alien ship's impenetrable shields. Every tactic they used seemed to be countered by the Arcturians' superior technology. Earth's forces had reached a point of desperation. If they were going to win, they needed something more, something they hadn't dared to tap into until now, docked deep within a secret underground bunker. A group of Earth's brightest scientists and engineers were working feverishly on an unprecedented project. They had long suspected that the answer to defeating the Arcturians lay not in outgunning them, but in outsmarting them. After months of research, they had discovered something unexpected, something buried deep within Earth's own history. It was an ancient artifact, an object that had been thought to be little more than a myth. Legend had it that the object, known only as the Heart of Earth, had once been used by an ancient civilization on Earth that had mysteriously vanished. The artifact was said to possess a power unlike any technology humanity had developed, a power capable of disrupting even the most advanced alien systems. For centuries, it had been locked away, its true potential hidden from the world. Now, in this moment of crisis, humanity's last hope rested on a long-lost relic. Jacob Pierce, now a leader of the Resistance, had been briefed about the Heart of Earth. He had never believed in the myths surrounding it. But as the Resistance began to lose ground against the Arcturians, he realized that they had nothing left to lose. The Heart was their only chance. He stood in the heart of the underground facility, staring at the artifact. It wasn't much to look at, a smooth, glowing crystal, about the size of a fist. But its energy was palpable. Jacob could feel it in the air, a low hum that seemed to resonate with something deep inside him. It was as though the crystal was calling to him, telling him that this was the key to humanity's victory. "Is this it?" Jacob asked, his voice tinged with awe. One of the lead scientists, Dr. Alina Carter, nodded. "This is the Heart of Earth. According to the ancient texts, it's a source of unimaginable power. We don't know all of its capabilities, but we know it has the potential to disrupt the Arcturians' technology. It's a weapon that can level the playing field." Jacob turned to the other members of the Resistance, his team of elite soldiers, who had been fighting alongside him from the beginning. They were just as skeptical as he was, but the stakes were too high to ignore any possibility of victory. "We don't have much time," Jacob said, his voice resolute. "We launch this now, or we lose everything. Are we ready?" The team nodded, a shared sense of urgency gripping them all. The heart of Earth had been hidden for centuries, but now it was humanity's last best hope. With the heart in their possession, Jacob's squadron launched into the sky, heading straight for the Arcturian flagship. The battle had shifted to a new stage, a desperate final stand. The heart's power was unknown, but they were about to find out if it could truly make a difference. As they approached the flagship, Jacob's heart pounded in his chest. The ship loomed ahead of them, a massive structure glowing with the same otherworldly light as the alien ships. This was it. No more second chances. No more desperation. This was the moment where humanity either fell or rose. Lock onto the heart's energy source. Jacob ordered his crew, his eyes fixed on the alien ship. "Let's see if this thing really works." As the heart of Earth was activated, something incredible happened. A surge of energy, unlike anything they had ever felt before, rippled through the atmosphere. The air seemed to crackle with electricity, and the very sky appeared to shimmer with a strange, radiant glow. The heart's power pulsed like a heartbeat, sending shockwaves of energy that ripped through the Arcturian ship's shields. The flagship's massive, impenetrable armor began to flicker and waver as the energy from the heart found its way into its systems. The aliens on the flagship were caught off guard, their technology no match for the power of the heart. The shields, once thought invincible, began to collapse, and the alien ship's weapon systems failed. The humans had done it against all odds. They had found a way to break the Arcturians' technological superiority. Jacob's team didn't hesitate. They fired everything they had, hitting the vulnerable points of the flagship with precision. Explosions erupted across the alien ship, and within moments, it was in flames. The alien invaders had been dealt a devastating blow. "We did it," Jacob whispered, his voice a mix of disbelief and triumph. But even as they celebrated the small victory, the war was far from over. The Arcturians were not finished. They still had an entire fleet, and they would not surrender easily. But the heart of Earth had given humanity something they hadn't had before: hope. The tide had begun to turn. And now, with the heart of Earth on their side, the humans were ready to take the fight to the Arcturians. It was no longer a battle for survival, it was a battle for the future. And this time, humanity was no longer the underdog. The Arcturians had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated the power of humanity's will, and the unexpected strength that lay within Earth's ancient past. And now they would learn the hard way that messing with humans was the worst move they could have made. The shifting tides, the victory against the Arcturian flagship, had done more than just break through their defenses. It had ignited a fire that would burn across the globe. News of the heart of Earth's power spread like wildfire, fueling the human resistance with a newfound strength. What had once seemed like an impossible war now felt winnable. The balance of power had shifted. The tide was no longer in the Arcturians' favor. Jacob Pierce stood before the map of the world, his eyes scanning the blinking dots that represented major battles. Earth was no longer retreating, it was pushing forward. From the Americas to Asia, Europe to Africa, the resistance was swelling in numbers, and every victory brought more and more people into the fight. People who had once hidden in fear, uncertain of their future, were now joining the battle with unmatched determination. "We have them on the run," Jacob said, his voice steady but filled with the kind of optimism that had been missing for so long. His team, gathered around the table, exchanged looks of cautious hope. It wasn't over yet, but they could see the first light of victory on the horizon. But even as humanity gained ground, the Arcturians were not idle. They had suffered significant losses, but they were quick to adapt. They had underestimated the humans once, but that mistake would not happen again. Commander Zarnak, in his flagship, watched the resistance grow stronger with a deepening frustration. This wasn't supposed to happen. "Deploy the new fleet," Zarnak ordered, his tone sharp, filled with quiet fury. The Arcturian fleet, although shaken, was far from defeated. With their reinforcements, they were preparing for a counterattack. That would show the humans just how small their victory had been. As the first of the new ships arrived in Earth's orbit, Jacob could sense the change in the air. The Arcturians were preparing for their final assault, and they weren't going to hold anything back. The heart of Earth had disrupted their systems, but it hadn't destroyed their entire force. The aliens were coming for a final push. Jacob's team, having gathered intelligence on the incoming fleet, made their preparations. They knew the battle to come would be the fiercest yet. The heart had given them an edge, but they needed more than just that. It would take everything they had to stand against the Arcturians now. The first wave of the new Arcturian fleet broke through Earth's outer defenses like a storm. Unlike their previous tactics, they weren't focusing on brute force alone. They had learned from their mistakes. Now they moved with precision, their ships coordinated in a way that seemed almost too perfect. The alien ships were faster, more agile, and more destructive than ever before. Jacob watched the battle unfold from the control room. "This is it," he muttered, tightening his grip on the console. "We need to hit them hard now. No hesitation." The resistance fighters, emboldened by their recent victory, fought with a new sense of purpose. It was no longer just about defending Earth. It was about taking the fight to the Arcturians and showing them that humanity would not kneel. The skies above Earth were filled with the sounds of combat as fighter jets swarmed against the alien ships, dodging plasma fire and exchanging devastating strikes. But even as they fought valiantly, the Arcturian fleet began to turn the tide. Their superior tactics and advanced weaponry were pushing Earth's forces to the brink. Jacob saw the first signs of weakness in his squadron. One by one, his comrades began to fall. Ships were destroyed in mid-air, and the resistance fighters, who had been so sure of victory, started to question whether they could win this battle. In the midst of the chaos, a sudden voice broke through the din of radio chatter. It was Dr. Elena Carter, the scientist who had helped unlock the heart of Earth's power. "We found something," she said urgently. "There's a weak point in the Arcturian ships. It's hidden, but we can exploit it. If we target it, we can bring down the entire fleet." Jacob's heart raced. "Where is it?" "It's their central core, an energy generator at the heart of their ships," Dr. Carter explained. "It's vulnerable, but they've hidden it with layers of shielding. We need to create a diversion, something that'll pull their attention away from it long enough for a small team to strike." Jacob didn't hesitate. He turned to his team, his voice steady and commanding. "We're going after that core. This is our chance to end this war." As the battle raged on, Jacob and his elite squadron executed a daring maneuver, drawing the attention of the Arcturian ships, making them believe they were focused on a new wave of human resistance. But this was just a diversion. In the chaos, a small specialized team infiltrated the alien fleet, using the newly developed EMP technology to temporarily disable the alien ships' shields. The team made their way toward the heart of the Arcturian flagship. Time was running out. They could feel the pulse of the heart of Earth in the air, its energy vibrating through their bones, guiding them toward their goal. They reached the central core, an energy source unlike anything they had ever seen, pulsing with raw power. The fate of Earth rested on the next few minutes. Jacob's breath caught as he set the charges on the core. "We either win this now, or we lose everything," he said quietly, his hands steady even as the room around him shook with the force of ongoing explosions. With a deep breath, he activated the device. The core's shield shattered with a burst of light, and then the entire Arcturian fleet erupted in a massive explosion. One by one, the ships began to fall, their systems collapsing in on themselves. The humans had done it. They had destroyed the heart of the Arcturian force. The battle ended not with a bang, but with a silence so profound it felt like the world itself had stopped breathing. Jacob stared at the debris in the sky, his chest heavy with exhaustion, but filled with something else, a feeling he hadn't felt since the war began: hope. Did it, he whispered to himself. But even as the Arcturian fleet was defeated, Jacob knew that the war wasn't over. The Arcturians were beaten, but the future of Earth still hung in the balance. What would happen now that humanity had proven its strength? Would the Arcturians accept defeat, or would they return for another fight? One thing was clear: this battle had marked a turning point. The Resistance had won, but Earth's real fight was only just beginning. The final confrontation, the dust from the exploded Arcturian flagship, still lingered in the air. The remnants of the once mighty fleet scattered across the sky like debris from a shattered dream. Earth's resistance had struck a blow to the invaders. But it wasn't over yet. The war wasn't won by the fall of one ship. It was just the beginning of a much larger, more dangerous conflict. The Arcturians were wounded, but they were not broken. And now, the final confrontation loomed on the horizon, one that would decide Earth's fate. In the aftermath of the battle, Jacob Pierce stood with his squadron, overlooking the vast expanse of space where the alien fleet had once hovered. His eyes were tired, but they burned with the determination to see this through. The humans had proven themselves resilient, but they were facing an enemy that would not relent, even in defeat. The Arcturians, now desperate, had begun to regroup, and their counterattack would be nothing short of brutal. Back on Earth, the Resistance continued to fight back against the remaining pockets of Arcturian forces. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for the future of every human being on the planet. People who had once been ordinary civilians were now warriors, united in a common cause. It was no longer about individual battles. It was about saving the entire world. Jacob's team was ready for what was coming. He knew the final push would be the hardest, but they couldn't afford to lose. He gathered his squadron one last time. They had no illusions about the enormity of the task ahead, but they were more determined than ever. Earth's survival depended on their success. "We've made it this far," Jacob said, his voice low but resolute. "We've turned the tide once, and we're going to do it again. This time we finish it. We take the fight to them, and we end this war." The final strike would come in the form of a massive assault, an all-out attack on the heart of the Arcturian Empire. Their flagship, the core of their operation, had taken a direct hit, but it was still alive. Zarnak, the Arcturian commander, had retreated to a distant moon where he had prepared a new weapon, one that would destroy Earth if unleashed. The Resistance had one shot to stop it. The odds were insurmountable, but Jacob and his team had no choice. This was the moment where everything would either be lost or won. As they approached the Arcturian base on the dark side of the moon, Jacob's heart pounded. This wasn't a mission to take prisoners. This was the endgame, and there was no turning back. The final battle was like nothing Earth had ever seen. Alien technology met human ingenuity in a clash of cosmic proportions. The ground shook as the Arcturian base fired its massive cannons into space, their destructive blasts lighting up the sky. The Resistance fighters fought with everything they had, engaging the Arcturian forces in a cataclysmic battle above and below the surface of the moon. But Jacob had a plan that relied not on brute force, but on one final desperate gamble. His squadron was tasked with infiltrating the Arcturian base and disabling the new weapon Zarnak had prepared. It was hidden deep within the moon's core, and no one knew what it could do, except that it was capable of wiping out Earth's entire population in one blow. "We hit them hard, we hit them fast," Jacob said, signaling his team to break formation. "We have one shot at this. Don't hesitate. Move out." As they descended toward the surface, Jacob's mind raced. The weapon had to be stopped. He couldn't afford to let fear or doubt creep in. The entire planet was counting on him. They had come too far to let this be their end. Inside the Arcturian base, the air was thick with tension. Alien soldiers patrolled the corridors, their movements precise and unyielding. Jacob and his team slipped through the shadows, using the darkness to their advantage. They had trained for this moment, every second of it. There was no room for mistakes. The deeper they moved into the base, the more dangerous it became. The Arcturians had anticipated an attack, and their defenses were set to kill on sight. But Jacob's team was relentless. They fought through wave after wave of alien soldiers, making their way toward the central chamber where the weapon was being kept. When they finally reached it, Jacob felt a cold shiver run down his spine. The weapon was massive, towering over them, its power pulsing with an almost malevolent energy. It was a machine designed to end everything, and it was almost ready to fire. Status report. Jacob barked into his comms, his heart racing. "We're in position," came the reply. "We've got 5 minutes before it powers up. Get in there and disable it now." Jacob didn't waste a second. He dashed forward, his team following closely behind. They had one chance to make it work. He reached the control panel, sweat dripping from his brow as he punched in the sequence of codes that would deactivate the weapon. Every second counted. Come on," Jacob muttered, his fingers moving quickly over the controls. The countdown was already ticking down, and then a voice boomed through the chamber. "You think you can stop this, human?" Zarnak's voice echoed across the room, cold and mocking. The alien commander had been watching them all along. Jacob looked up, his eyes locking onto Zarnak, who stood at the far end of the room, flanked by his elite guard. "You underestimate." "U.S. Commander," Jacob said, his voice steady despite the tension. "We're not just fighting to survive. We're fighting for everything," Zarnak sneered, raising his weapon. "Then prepare to lose everything." But before he could fire, a surge of energy pulsed through the room. The heart of Earth, still active in the Resistance's base, sent out a burst of energy that disrupted the control systems, short-circuiting the weapon and sending Zarnak's forces into disarray. The weapon's countdown slowed. Jacob didn't waste a second. "We're done here," he shouted. With a final push, he activated the final override code, and the weapon powered down. Zarnak roared in fury as his empire's last hope was destroyed in front of him. The weapon was no more, and Earth's fate was sealed. The final battle was over. The Resistance had won. But even in victory, Jacob knew this was only the beginning of a new era. They had stopped the invaders, but now they would have to rebuild. They would have to rebuild their world stronger, united, and more determined than ever. The Arcturians had learned a hard lesson. Never underestimate the power of humanity, and Earth would never be the same. The dawn of a new era. The sky above Earth had never been as still as it was now. The alien invasion, which had once seemed unstoppable, had finally come to an end. The stars shone brightly, unmarred by the shadow of the Arcturian fleet. Yet, even as peace settled over the planet, the weight of the war remained. The battles fought, the lives lost, and the sacrifices made were all too fresh in the minds of the survivors. Jacob Pierce stood at the edge of the rebuilt command center, looking out over the horizon. Below him, the city of New York was beginning to rise from its ashes, streets cleared of rubble, buildings reconstructed, life returning to the once devastated streets. It was a sight he never thought he would see again. After everything Earth had endured, he thought back to the war, the explosions, the endless battles, and the overwhelming feeling of helplessness. Yet, through all the chaos, something extraordinary had happened. Humanity had shown its true strength, not just in fighting off an alien invasion, but in coming together. Despite their differences, despite the division that had once plagued them, Earth had united. Every race, every nation, every people stood side by side, determined to protect what they held dear. The war was over, but the journey was just beginning. We did it. Elena Carter said softly, her voice tinged with exhaustion and relief as she walked up behind Jacob. She, like everyone else, had watched the planet change over the last few months. The heart of Earth had been activated. The weapon of unimaginable power had been deactivated. And now, it was time for rebuilding. Jacob turned to face her. Did we? His words hung in the air. Though the war was over, it didn't feel like victory. Just yet, there was so much more to be done. Elena smiled, a quiet confidence in her eyes. We did. We're here. We're still here. That's more than we could have asked for. Jacob nodded, feeling the weight of her words. Earth had survived against all odds. The Arcturians, now scattered and leaderless, had been forced to retreat. They'd suffered devastating losses, and their empire had been left in ruins. The survivors would need years to rebuild. For the first time in a long while, Earth stood alone, no invaders, no looming threat, no immediate danger. But with that peace came another challenge: how to rebuild. The war had changed everything. The resistance wasn't just fighting the Arcturians anymore. They were fighting for a future where the mistakes of the past wouldn't be repeated. The world had tasted unity and resilience in the face of destruction. It was now time to figure out how to preserve it. We can't go back to how things were, Jacob said, his eyes scanning the bustling streets below. We can't let everything we fought for be lost. Elena placed a hand on his shoulder. No one's asking you to go back. The world's been forever changed, but that doesn't have to be a bad thing. It wasn't just about military victories or surviving invasions anymore. It was about the people who had come together to fight, not just for their survival, but for something better. The war had taught humanity what it was capable of. Now it was time to take that power and build something lasting. Around the world, leaders from all nations had already begun gathering, working together to establish a new global government. The old ways of division and nationalism were being replaced with a new vision, one born from the shared struggle. No longer would countries fight each other. Now they were united in a common cause: rebuilding Earth and ensuring that future generations wouldn't have to fight the same battles. Jacob and Elena weren't the only ones working toward this new future. Across the globe, individuals were stepping up to lead, to heal, to innovate. The war had inspired a new kind of leadership, one forged not in the fires of military conquest, but in the crucible of cooperation and hope. As Jacob stood in the command center, looking at the map of the world, he saw a future that was not defined by fear or destruction. Instead, it was defined by something greater, a future where humanity could thrive, rebuild, and rise to new heights. They had overcome the impossible, and now they could build the world they deserved. But there was one more thing left to do. The Arcturian invasion had left a scar on Earth, a wound that, though healed on the surface, had left deep emotional and cultural marks on every individual. There was still work to be done, not just in rebuilding cities, but in healing hearts and minds. The human spirit had been tested, and it had survived, but there was a long road ahead. The scars of war would linger, but so too would the lessons learned. As the first new ships began to launch into space, human ships, not invader ships, Jacob realized that Earth was not just rebuilding physically. They were preparing to take their place in the stars, not as a species that had been conquered, but as one that had conquered its own doubts, fears, and limitations. Ready for the next chapter? Elena asked, her voice filled with the quiet optimism that had always been a part of her. Jacob turned to face her, a slight smile tugging at his lips. Yeah, let's make sure it's a better one. The universe had changed, and Earth, with its newfound strength and unity, was ready to take on whatever came next. The Arcturians had made a grave mistake underestimating humanity. But humanity had learned its lesson too. The fight for survival had turned into the fight for a better future, and the victory was only just beginning. And so, the dawn of a new era began. One that would not just define the future of Earth, but the entire universe.